Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to all the participants. Very welcome to join the last session organized by the UK Higher Education Chinese Employee Association. My name is Jie Liu. I'm the founder of the association. And today's talk is going to be co-hosted between me and my colleague from the University of Coventry, Dr. Mei Yu. She's an assistant professor in finance and the schools of economics, finance, and accounting. And also, I got quite a few other colleagues, such as Dr. Wei Kang. She's supporting us at the back as well. Right. So now, please allow me to formally introduce our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Chang Shu. As you can see from the slide just now, very, very impressive profile already. So I will just mention her background briefly here. And Dr. Shu is a Bloomberg Chief Asia Economist based in Hong Kong. She leads a team to reach into China, Japan, Australia, and other major economies in Asia Pacific. She leads a team to research into China, Japan, Australia, and other major economies in Asia Pacific. She also had extensive working experience at the Bank of International Settlement, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Chinese Financial Association of Hong Kong, Bank of England, to name a few. So without further ado, Dr. Shu, now the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you for inviting me here to have this conversation with friends in England and elsewhere. And a great pleasure to be here. I had a chat with Sherry beforehand. I think I think it's we can make this pretty informal, formal as you like, or as informal as you like. I will start my talk. I'll cover the global economy, major economies, US, UK, US, Europe, UK, and I'll discuss the Chinese economy. As Sherry introduced, I lead a team to cover the Asian Pacific economies, but I spend most of the time to look at China, and clearly that's what a lot of people, what the market is interested in. And I also would briefly introduce the observations from our other teams from the UK, US, etc. But what I would love is to hear your views, because you are living there in Europe, in UK, and I would love to hear, kind of what's happening on the ground. That's my incentive to join this conversation. So I should start by sharing. Oh, here it is. Okay, as I mentioned, I'll start with the global economy. We have had a very a pretty tough. Let me just make sure. I think we're okay. Sorry. Okay, let me start with the global economy. The 2022 is pretty difficult for the global economy. The Fed has tightened the monetary policy pretty aggressively, and there's an energy squeeze due to the Ukraine war, and China has slowed down quite sharply. So all the factors are weighing very heavily on the global economy. In 2023, we see some of the negative factors to extend into the new year, which is obviously not very pleasant. We see in the US and in many parts of the world, including in the UK and in Europe, the interest rates are staying high, and the energy squeeze is still there. There's potentially a positive, but a very likely a positive factor coming from China. As many of you know, China has turned around its COVID policy. It's made it quite clear it's going to pivot to living with the virus. And clearly, that's going to be a major lift to China's growth, as well as a cushion for the global economy. Even so, when we combine all the different factors together, we see that we see the global economy could slow down to 2.4% growth in 2023 compared to 3.2% in 2022. So that actually falls within the realm of economic recession for the global economy. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, put a definition of 2.5% as a recession for the global economy. So at this point, Bloomberg economics projection really puts the global growth within that sort of recessionary territory. In the meantime, inflation, there's some sort of positive sort of trend. Our assessment is that inflation has peaked in the third quarter. It's behind us, the highest inflation, and inflation going forward is going to fall by throughout the year. And that's we project that by the end of next year, it's going to be around 5% or so lower than in 2022, but clearly that's still much higher than pre-pandemic period. The next one, a big background about the US. The US may face a difficult choice of inflation versus recession. The Fed may have to make a choice. Sorry. So let's start with growth in the US. What I have presented here is the US recession indicator model our team develops. This white line kind of in the charts presents the readings for the recession model. The latest reading is saying over the next 12 months, over the next year, there's almost 100% chance for the US to fall into a recession. How did we come up with this recession, the recession indicator? We have a model encompassing 13 indicators from the financial markets as well as the real economy. So the 100% rating for the recession indicator captures the weakening in the real economy as well as tightening financial conditions in the US economy. At this point, our US team is projecting a recession in the third quarter of next year, and for the US as a whole, for the 2023 as a whole, we don't see any growth in the US. That compares to 0.5% growth in 2022. It's still possible that the US can avoid a recession. It really depends on the development in inflation. At this point, our team is projecting, the baseline is projecting a gradual decline of inflation to 3.5% by the end of 2023. That's almost half of the inflation rating by the end of this year. But this is the baseline. The inflationary development is very uncertain. That so many different factors. We can see upside risks. You can upside and downside risks. If you think about upside risks, you can think perhaps China can reopen the economy faster, or the energy prices are higher than we projected. Therefore, inflation will be higher than our projection, and the Federal Reserve will have to work harder or raise the interest rate even more than we anticipated. But you can equally think of downside risks. Perhaps the winter is not too cold, which appears to be the case in Europe for now, at least for now. And that means overall inflationary pressure coming from energy could be lower, and the Federal Reserve could raise the interest rate less. So that's all possible. If we look at the Fed stance now, it's pretty aggressive. The Federal Reserve has raised the interest rate by 425 basis points this year, 3 times by 75 basis points. In the latest meeting, the Fed slowed the pace of rate hikes and just raised the interest rate by 50 basis points. But the message is still very hawkish. It's suggesting that the terminal rate could be above 5%. And based on the Federal Reserve FOMC members' projections, we see that actually quite a number of members see recession coming in the US. At least more than half of the members of the FOMC members see a recession coming, but they are anticipating a relatively shallow recession, and the unemployment rates might not rise that high. Therefore, the message from them essentially is that they are prepared to see a recession. Essentially, they're prepared to see a recession in order to bring the inflation down. So the message is quite hawkish. We, Bloomberg economics team, thinks the terminal rate will be 5%, and that can be reached in the first quarter next year. And after that, the Federal Reserve will stay put and cut the interest rate in the first quarter of 2024. And again, we can think perhaps in some sort of scenarios, let's say China's economy takes a turn for the worse, or the recession in the euro area is sharper than we projected. That would bring a lot of pressures on the US economy, and then the Fed might not be able to raise interest rates by as much as it's projecting now. And maybe they might even cut the interest rates next year. That's all possible given the unusual degree of uncertainties surrounding the global economy. But at this point, that's not our baseline scenario. So a couple of sort of slides on Europe and UK. In terms of Europe, this year has been very tough. But the fiscal policy has been very supportive. The European governments across Europe had been very supportive on the fiscal front to cushion the energy squeeze. Monetary policy has been pretty tight. The pace of the European ECB tightening the monetary policy has been unprecedented. It's extremely fast. Going forward, when we look into next year, several factors are unfavorable. I think our European team thinks that the government in Europe are going to change its stance from more supportive stance in 2022 to a stance that worries a bit more about fiscal balance, in balance their books, as it were. So on the fiscal front, the support would not be there, or at least not as strong as 2022. In the meantime, interest rates are going to remain high, and the high interest rates, high borrowing cost, and high debt level is going to drag the overall economy. Overall, we see that in the third quarter, at this point, our European team is projecting that in the third quarter, in the final quarter, the quarter we're in now, Europe could see a recession. The recession will stretch into the first quarter next year, and for the year as a whole in 2023, there'll be zero growth in Europe. So finally, just quickly on the UK economy, that at this point, the 2022 is one of the most volatile year in the British economic history, and in a way, I think it's tough in many ways. I would love to hear your views, how you think about this, but it's a year that the UK as a whole country, as a country, almost loses economic or financial credibility. So the new government, the current government, will have to work hard to win back that credibility from the market. Next year, a lot of challenging situations. The condition could get worse before it gets better. Real income is falling. Interest is very high. That's a thing throughout the developed economies, and the global economy, as we discussed, is slowing down. That's all going to drag the UK economy. Our team's projection is at this point for the UK economy, it's going to shrink by 1.4% compared to a growth of 4% for this year. So let me focus on the China economy a bit more. And for 2022, it's a very difficult year again. And for many other economies, the COVID zero policy is pretty disastrous for growth. And it's great to see the government has clearly changed its stance to pivot to living with the virus. The determination is clear there from the government's point of view, but it doesn't mean the process is going to be very smooth. And I'm pretty sure you all have friends and relatives in China, and many of them have got infected. So in the near term, the widespread infections across the country are going to drag down production as well as consumption side. So it's going to be painful over the next few months. But we see overall this pivot to living with the virus is going to be tremendously helpful for the overall economy. We see that once the economy is open in the first year, the boost to the economy can be 1.6 percentage points based on our calculation. And then property markets, another big driver for China's growth. The market has been adjusting prices, and transaction volumes have been declining for many months, and real estate investment has declined by close to 10% in the first 11 months. The government again recently has shown a more supportive stance for the property market. It announced a comprehensive package to support the market. The focus is really on kind of easing tight liquidity conditions for developers, so that they can build houses and deliver houses to people. That certainly is helpful. It can bring back kind of demand to the market, and in the short term that could help to stabilize the market. But over the longer term, we think the adjustment in the property market is likely to be measured by months and years. We have done some analysis looking at the demand and supply side of the economy. By demand, we're looking into the fundamental demand driven by, for example, the population growth and the urbanization rates, and clearly the population growth has slowed and is expected to starting to contract in the coming years. And urbanization rates, that over the last 3 decades, the urbanization pace has been really high. In the early 1990s, China's urbanization rate was just 30%, but now it's close to 70%. And going forward, that process might slow. So if you look at those fundamental drivers, fundamental demands, it's going to slow. In the meantime, if you look at the supply side, you can see some sort of supply overhang. We put the supply and demand side together, we think the property investment will have to adjust by a large degree. I mean, you all do research here in universities, and I'm pretty sure you understand in doing this type of estimation that there are massive uncertainties associated with the estimates. And I might not be entirely 100% sure about the 25% adjustment needed for the next decade. But one thing I'm convinced of is that the adjustment is going to be very big in the coming years. And then we talked about the extent of the adjustment. It can be 25% based on our estimate, but the paths to get there can be different. Our our baseline scenario is sort of a gradual, orderly adjustment. So in this scenario, the government is able to stabilize the market and puts in more investment, government spending in some other areas to partly offset private sector investment in real estate. So maybe over the next few years, the property market in property investment may decline by 3% or so, and partly offset by government investment elsewhere. Therefore, the drag on GDP growth is manageable in a way. But we can think of other 2 scenarios. One is the government. One is the government somehow fails to stabilize the markets, and property market sees a crash, adjusting by 15, 20, 25% within a couple of years. And that could well trigger a financial market crisis. And then the impact on the economy will be massive. And then the final scenario is perhaps, some people are kind of speculating because the government is under huge pressure to boost growth. Therefore, it does what you usually did, which is to create another boom in the property market and to offset downward pressures. But in a few years' time, the government will have to withdraw policy support from the property market, and then the adjustment would be even greater. At this point, we are discounting the last 2 scenarios. We attach relatively small probability from it to them. We think the signal from the government has been quite clear. We see in last week, the government just held the central 2022 central work conference, and the conference sent quite a balanced signal on the property market. On the one hand, it's taking stabilizing the property market as a way of preventing financial crisis or financial systemic risk in the financial system. So the government, we think, is going to put a floor under the property market on the one hand. Yet on the other hand, the government again repeated its clear view that the houses are for living in, not for speculation. So putting those signals together, we think, you know, it's the market will not have a hard crash landing, and it's more likely to have a sort of gradual adjustment. So in terms of the outlook, one more factor, exports has been a strong support for China's growth over the last few years, and but earlier we saw that the global economy is going to slow down. That's not going to be a support for China's growth in 2023. And if we put all the different factors together, the COVID pivot, policy pivot, the property market, and the exports, we see in overall terms, China's growth is going to accelerate next year to, you know, perhaps 5.1% from this year's 3%. And finally, we talked about some sort of slightly brighter economic outlook for China for next year, but there are huge challenges both in the short term and the longer term. In terms of the short term, we talked about, you know, the transition to living with the virus is not going to be smooth. You know, the transition, the process looks as if it's going to carry both economic and public health risks, and that's one issue. Another issue the government is acutely aware is very poor sentiment in the country among ordinary people, consumers, firms, corporates, markets, and the sentiment has been very poor because of the multiple shocks from different directions. Really, you have the COVID, this kind of, if you like, sort of ad hoc way of tightening regulatory policy, and property market adjustments. So for under the multiple, with the multiple shocks, the sentiment has been poor. The government has made lifting the sentiment as the priority for next year's work plan, kind of work agenda. So that shows the government is clearly aware of that. It has announced various measures to boost that, and hopefully those policies can be properly implemented and help to turn the sentiment around. Because without turning the sentiment around, the economy cannot have a strong recovery. So that's sort of, those are the challenges in the short term, but over the longer term, there are some very serious structural factors. We know the aging population, the multi-year property adjustment we just talked about, and geopolitical tensions that are leading to supply chain and global financial sector realignment. What does that mean for China's global kind of presence, economic growth, and financial system? So all sorts of challenging questions, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Okay, so in terms of sort of economic presentation, I'll just stop here. I'm not sure about the audience today, but let me, because I understand most of you are researchers, professors in universities. So maybe I'll just quickly sort of finish off by introducing the Bloomberg economics team. You probably know more about Bloomberg's financial news and financial data. Economics, the economics team has, economics teams have been fairly strong in Bloomberg. We have a much bigger unit. We have over 300 people or so in what's called Bloomberg Intelligence Unit that looks at some sectors, markets, companies, whilst we are called Bloomberg Economics Team, which looks at the macro side. So this is, if you have a Bloomberg terminal, I don't know whether you have this. I know in the US, Bloomberg has worked with some universities, donating some terminals to them. If you have access to the terminal, that would be our landing page for Bloomberg economics research. So you have this, you can see we have coverage for the different geographic regions. We have kind of cover all the majors, advanced economies and emerging markets. And so this is this one, and we have a kind of mirror page for the Chinese. And here is our economics team. We have 5 teams. We have the North America team, Asia Pacific team, European team, emerging market one, and we have, over the past year or so, we built up an economic modeling team, and the head of our modeling team used to head the modeling team in Europe, and we have a very strong team, and 2 of the leading economists in the US are from the Federal Reserve, and our special advisor to the US team, he used to be the head of research in Federal Reserve, and many of our colleagues have backgrounds in central banks and the UK Treasury, for example. So that's our economic team, and I think I will stop here. So there's some of kind of sort of my transition kind of from working in the central bank doing research to a private sector. And I just want to quickly also mention, I know the talk is sort of informal, it's not entirely about economics. So I want to mention a charity I've been supporting over many years. So the charity is called Yes We Do. It aims to provide kind of better education for children in underprivileged families. It can be children in rural areas in the mainland, or it can be kind of people from children from less well-off families in Hong Kong. And so yes stands for confidence, we means community, do shows kind of responsibility. So we've been doing this for a long time, and it's when I started this, I thought I was sort of giving out to the community, but over the years I just realized that I just gained so much more. I got so much more out of the project than I have put in. I got to know some great friends, like-minded friends, and lots of them are professionals, and the young people who have worked as volunteers in the charity. So overall, it's it's a great experience for me. Okay, so I've been talking nonstop for a long time. Let me stop here, and I look forward to the conversations with all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Shu, for the insightful and informative talk. And now let's open the floor for questions. Any questions?
So my question I have posted on the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me look here. Let me just.
I just wanted to ask how Bloomberg make sure that there is this data from China is efficient and coefficient data, because I know that during COVID-19 there is most of the data about any data related to COVID, like number of deaths, number of cases, was unknown. So because I was doing research during COVID-19 and I was trying to collect all the data from all over the world and see which data is available, and I found that it's really, really difficult to collect data from China, especially if we are talking about number of cases or number of deaths during COVID-19. And even like in places like websites like our like big data or stuff like this, they doesn't provide it over there. So did you find it really critically, or it's hard to like finalize this financial report that you present about China, or how did you collect the data about China? Thank you.
So, thank you for the question. Yeah, the China, we are able to correct we collect data from official sources, and so at the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, obviously it was difficult, and the government provided figures, but it was, it's because the situation evolved very quickly. You need to read the figures with a pinch of salt. But after that, the kind of I think for a long time the data have improved. The data improved for a long time until recently. When the government decided to change the policy again, and it's the extent of the infections or the outbreaks mean that it's not practical, it's not feasible for the government to collect the data again. Therefore, they stopped collecting certain, for example, symptomatic data. But perhaps you are referring to the official data are there. You possibly mean that that's not in the time series format, right? I think we have a data team which just essentially just sort of, I don't know how they did exactly, but they must be collecting it on a daily basis. Therefore, we do have this complete data series on Bloomberg terminal. So I don't know whether I addressed your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for this informative session. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions?
I think we got one from Dr. Guo from the Queen Mary University.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Guo, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for your insightful sharing. So it's very helpful for me to understand the whole picture of the global economy. My question is a short question, a very quick question. So in your slides, it mentioned that property investment will drop by 25% in the next 10 years. So does this prediction include Chinese market? So I'm thinking if the Chinese government would like to stimulate the economy, especially in the next year. So the target is about 5% or 5.5% increase of the GDP. So will property investment will be eased as a major means again. So what's the points and cons? Do you think is a wise kind of the means to reinvest the property market again? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this you asked a question that many people would love to know, really. Our sense is that first of all, based on economic fundamentals, market fundamentals, the adjustment will have to be extended in the property market. And secondly, is the attitude we talked about. I don't think the government really wants to generate yet another property boom. It wants to put a floor under the market. It doesn't want the market to collapse. If we talked about this scenario of property market crash, that's not the economy is not able to. It is not going to withstand that. That's going to really crash the economy as well. So without the government is going to do that. So we are thinking the government is going to sort of stabilize enough. So if you think about it, this year, a stabilization would already be a boost for growth for next year. So if you think about it, if this year the property investment almost declined by 10%, yeah. Next year, if the property market will just decline, for example, by 3%, a lesser drag on the economy, that's already a boost to growth. Yeah, so essentially it's some sort of base effect there. And then you have the COVID pivot, which is going to be a major lift for the growth. So overall terms, I think the government is going to walk a very tight rope. I think as far as I can see, it's very clear the government doesn't want another sort of financial boom, property market boom. So I doubt it's going to sort of do something massive for the property market. But it's a tough balance. I can see your concern.
Thank you, Dr. Shu. Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, I would like to ask a question as well.
Yeah, please.
Hi. I'm on iPhone, but it's Portia.
Yeah, okay.
I was just listening in, and obviously it's really good presentation and very informative. But in terms of the recession, I didn't get how long it's expected for the recession to run, or the length of this recession, how long it's expected. And in terms of interest rate, I think there was that you said it's estimated that interest rate would possibly go down. Normally in a recession, doesn't that mean that the bank, even the Bank of England and the bank globally, will have to consider start adjusting interest rate downwards to obviously manage this?
Yeah. So you are asking UK or the US? Because we did talk about, or you are talking
UK.
about UK.
Yes, UK.
In terms of UK, the recession, and so at this point we're projecting 2 quarters, and it really whether I agree with you. Normally, when growth is weakening, the government will have to. The central bank will need to tend to a supportive stance. But unfortunately, at this point, it's a very tough act for the central bank. At this point, that they're really worried about inflation. They're worried about central bank credibility. They want to bring They want to bring inflation down to 2% in a sustained way, and they are learning the lessons globally. The central banks across the globe are learning lessons from the US in the 1970s, when the the raising interest rates and inflation appeared to be down, but once the economy started to pick up, inflation got up out of hand again. They tried very hard to avoid that lesson. So therefore, this time, unless the central bank, not only the Bank of England, I used to work there, not only the Bank of England, but all the other central banks are in the same position. Unless they feel comfortable about the trend of inflation, they're not going to cut the interest rates. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Shu.
Okay, thank you.
We have one more question from Dr. Kang, please.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Hello, Dr. Shu. Thank you so much for sharing this talk with us. And I'm Wei coming from Anglia Ruskin University. And in terms of the inflation, actually, I got a question because we see that the inflation is riding high in many developed and even emerging markets. And we see that China just, all of a sudden just reopen, and it seems is way sooner than we thought. So I just wonder if China just to reopen the economy will, become another source of the inflation, or that's going to be another way around, because the China has a quite, the huge and completed the supply chain in global, so I just wonder if China reopen, that's going to ease the kind of the stress of the inflation. So I just, would like to see how you could come on that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a really great question and tough question. Actually, we would say that China's reopening is good for growth. Certainly great for China's growth for sure. And it should provide, as the title of the presentation suggested, it could provide a cushion to the global economy. If you look at it, the projection is overall, the US could go into a recession in the second half of next year, and by then China is more or less reopened, like fully open, kind of from the second quarter or second half of this year. So that could provide a lift to global growth, but I agree with you, it's going to be mixed news on the inflationary side. Yeah, once China's demand comes back, that could easily sort of increase demand for inflation. That pushes up the inflation, making harder for other central banks to cut interest rates, like we talked about in addressing the previous question. So it's going to be tough. In fact, as I talked earlier in the presentation, for a lot, even for the US, and I'm pretty sure it's true for many other central banks, one upside risk for inflation is China reopen faster, and China's recovery is stronger than we projected. In that case, the central banks will be in a very, very tough spot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shu.
Yeah, the next question, Professor Yang, please.
Dr. Chu, thank you very much for your very informative talk. My background in environmental science, like a low carbon economy, renewable energy, solar panel, wind, the European country talk about the climate change, the COP27 just in Egypt last month. What do you think is the future low carbon economy in China and Europe? Do you think can be very difficult because the Ukraine war, there's no enough gas, or do you think it's still continue?
Yeah, it's very tough. I think since you asked this question, I suspect you know much more. You have done much more research than me on this one. I think it's tough. I want to get a sense from you the European perspective. I can see China is very serious about carbon neutral. That's for sure, and lots are happening on the ground, and kind of the infrastructure, the carbon trading, the sort of transition, not only sort of new energy sectors, but also transition of old energy sectors to sort of to kind of transition to kind of using cleaner energies. And I mean, that's all heading that way. I mean, I'm quite excited about this. There's something maybe I want to quickly mention to you. You know, maybe if you're in the energy sphere, working in the energy sphere, you know Ma Jun, Dr. Ma Jun. Yeah. So he's doing a lot of work, and he spearheaded. He sort of had the idea, and also working with him on a new green charity, so sort of to support the initiative. But so overall, I'm trying to say it's very tough. It's not easy, and the government, the central government, is clearly very serious about it. But it's not, much more needs to be done. It's very challenging at the local government level. The central bank is trying to get the message through. You know, back in 2021, the country experienced power shortage. That's because local governments really didn't have much idea about what this transition is about, you know, to meet the carbon neutral demand. I just, you know, just stop producing power or something, and that clearly doesn't work. So the government is saying it's not something you can, something that will happen overnight. You have to build up the infrastructure. I think the government is quite serious about this. What are your thoughts? I would love to hear the kind of new energy landscape in Europe. So now Europe doesn't buy energy from Russia. Where is Europe buying energy from, and is that sufficient? And what challenges does it pose to Europe in terms of reaching the carbon neutral goal?
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Dr. Shu, do you have any advice to offer to the students here?
Okay. So if you do have some students, I think maybe I'll quickly address the career question, but I do want to sort of turn the table around. I do want to get some kind of ask you guys some questions. In terms of career, I did prepare those things, but I wasn't sure how many students were there, so I didn't really talk about my career path. So let me quickly mention that I made a transition from the sort of public sector to private sector, and I know different types of. Yours are all economic students.
Finance, finance,
finance
economics.
Students, yeah. So I understand the different paths of economics, finance. So you can work in academia, or in a central bank, or as a market economist like myself in the private sector, and they are sort of different. It can be different, that different, which we don't have time to get into, but I think it's good to be open-minded, you know, not just get fixated on one particular career path. So that's one suggestion. A second thing, the reason I sort of talked a bit about my charity work is to say, kind of when you do things, when you choose something, choose a career, no matter career or other things, you do something you feel passionate about. You don't count immediate returns, like I just mentioned. When I got into the charity, I thought I was giving, but I ended up having the biggest gain of my life in terms of sort of getting friends and insights in of how other people live their lives, how challenging life can be in different parts of China. So essentially, kind of, if you like, two pieces of advice. The first is, don't be open-minded rather than being fixated on a particular career path. Secondly, kind of do things you enjoy rather than counting the immediate returns. So that would be my basic suggestions.
Thank you very much for your advice.